and ESPN News. 888-SAY-ESPN is our telephone number, 888-729-3776. And if you need seats to a game, download the Vivid Seats app and enter promo code CHAMPS at checkout to get 10% off your first order. Don't buy just any seat, get a Vivid seat. And Stephen A. Smith Show is also being brought to you by New Shell V-Power Nitro Plus Premium Gasoline, now with 4 levels of defense against gunk, wear, corrosion, and friction. Preseason football going to start up in earnest here this week, and who better to talk about the NFL with than our good buddy, ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark, who joins me in studio. Ryan, good to see you as always, my friend.
Good to see you, my man.
How's everything going?
Everything's good. I mean, summer's over now, right?
Summer's over.
Time to get to ball.
Absolutely, and you're certainly familiar with that from all your years playing. I mean, this is the time where you're getting ready to rock and roll here, and looks like Tom Brady's going to be sticking around at least for another year, gets the contract extension with the New England Patriots. I mean, are we past the point? And look, you've had, unfortunately, a lot of games over your career and trips to the playoffs that were ruined by Tom Brady and those Patriots, but are we past the point of marveling just what this guy has been able to do for this long?
You know, I don't necessarily think so. I think it's also been his willingness to reinvent who he is, his willingness to reinvent the position he plays on that team. And I'm not talking about the quarterback position. I mean, when you look at his numbers, they're actually not very different from Baker Mayfield's in touchdowns to interceptions to completion percentage, but he made the winning plays. He was a guy who understood where the ball needed to go late in the Kansas City Chiefs game. He also understood that running the ball and playing good defense was how they were going to win the Super Bowl. And so when you can kind of do some of those things and don't have to be the guy that slings it all around the field, and understand that football is the greatest team sport because it's about coming together and winning football games, and that's why he's always taking less money. He's always giving the team opportunities to build around him. So I don't think you can stop marveling at what Tom Brady has done or is doing, but you can definitely talk about it in a way that I think is from a more educated standpoint in analyzing and understanding that Tom Brady's had a method. Bill Belichick has had a method, and that method has worked for them.
And you talk about it being a team game, which of course it is. And if you look at this New England team here for the upcoming season, I mean, there are some notable absences, led, of course, by Rob Gronkowski, okay? His left tackle last year is now playing out in Oakland. He got a bunch of money. Given all that said, and maybe eventually Father Time is going to start to catch up with them a little bit, when you look at this Patriots team for the upcoming season, is there any sort of concern there might be a slight drop-off?
I think there's always concern, right? But we also look and question the New England Patriots different than we do other teams, right? Is there concern that the Rams may have a drop-off? Yes, right? Whenever you have a season that is as successful as the New England Patriots have, there's always a concern that things may change. The thing that helps this team is having Bill Belichick, having Josh McDaniels, and having a team that is able to replace and morph, right? You look at the New England Patriots, they're like the Alabama of professional football in the sense that their assistants leave, right? Why do their assistants leave? They leave to go get head coaching jobs. They leave to get coordinating jobs, and so they're replaced, right? You have players that leave, not just good players. You've had great players. Ty Law has moved on. Seymour has moved on. Vince Wilfork, Jamie Collins, and these are guys who have moved on when they still had more football to play. Is Rob Gronkowski a huge loss? He is. But this team has made it to a Super Bowl without Rob Gronkowski playing. This team has won games without him playing. And I think he's being overlooked for what he did for this team's identity, for what he did for this team's run game, and obviously we know what he was as a pass receiver. But this team replaces people, and they're going to find ways to be competitive again. So along with the Kansas City Chiefs, I think that the New England Patriots are a team that you would favor to see in the AFC Championship once again at the end of this season.
And they really don't have much of a challenge, at least as of yet, from the teams in their division in the AFC East, which makes things a little bit easier on them. And you could probably expect to see maybe a little bit of an increase in that run game this year, too, with the two-headed monster that they have in that backfield. Now, speaking of the run game, you look at the Dallas Cowboys, and we're still waiting for Zeke to show up here, and we know how instrumental he is for that offense. Zeke needs a contract. Well, not needs, wants a contract. Dak eventually has to get taken care of. Amari Cooper. Jerry said he's confident that he's going to be able to get all these guys done. If you were the Cowboys, and we live in a quarterback-driven world, where do you prioritize those guys that you need to satisfy with the contracts?
You prioritize the guys that you could lose. Right now, you can't lose Zeke. Now, he may sit out.
So you're putting him over Dak even?
No, I'm putting Dak over Zeke.
You're still putting the quarterback
And what
first.
I mean by you can't lose, I don't mean you can't lose like, oh, I don't want you to go.
Right.
Zeke can't go yet. right? It's not a Le'Veon Bell situation where if he sits out for the entire season, he gets to be a free agent. No, if he sits out for the entire season, he's going to have to be willing to sit out another season without pay
and lose a lot of money.
Right, in order to prove to you that he can let little bank take big bank, but that's not how it works.
Right.
But you do have Dak Prescott, who you have identified as your franchise quarterback. We saw him come along toward the second half of the season once Amari Cooper was acquired. And so now you have to get Dak taken care of because you got lucky and got him in the fourth round. You don't have an option of a fifth year with him. So you need to take care of your quarterback. And this is a quarterback-driven league. And in the end, Dak Prescott, even though not as talented at his position as Ezekiel Elliott, will probably play in this league longer because of the position that he plays. So I think you take care of Dak first, and then after that, you try to take care of Ezekiel Elliott if it's something you're willing to do with 2 years left on his contract.
Are you confident? Have you seen enough? And you mentioned since Amari Cooper, or when Amari Cooper came on board last year, I mean, that offense was fairly prolific. But minus Zeke Elliott, do we know yet what type of quarterback Dak Prescott is? Is he in that upper tier of quarterback minus the running game?
He's not. He's not in the upper tier
Which
of
is dangerous for them this year.
He's not in the upper tier of quarterback with the running game. I think if you look at this, you don't put him in the top tier where you have guys like Drew Brees, Tom Brady, where you have guys like Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes. And then you go to the next level, you have the Russell Wilsons and the Andrew Lucks. And though there are no conversations where Dak Prescott belongs in those conversations, right? But if you have the running back conversation, Ezekiel Elliott is square in every conversation for a top back in this league, whether it's with Todd Gurley, Le'Veon Bell. And so now you see that and you think, well, we should pay Ezekiel Elliott, but it's not how it works, right? You know how they say that certain things don't grow on trees? Running backs kind of do, right?
It's been proven.
When you had DeMarco Murray, you ran the ball pretty well. Darren McFadden on the back end of his career, he rushed for over 1,000 yards. And so I think when you start to see some of those things, you think, okay, we can still have a running game. We can get a running game going. But right now, Dak Prescott is our quarterback. Dak Prescott is the guy we want to move forward with. And if we don't have Dak Prescott, it's not necessarily what you have in him. Is if you don't have him, who are you going to get? And I think that always becomes the problem that presents itself when quarterbacks have opportunities to become free agents.
And isn't this, though, I mean, in a way, when you look at the Cowboys for the upcoming season, couldn't this almost be viewed as if the clock is kind of ticking on them? Because you just brought it up. Dak Prescott is playing on a rookie contract. He was a mid-round draft choice. Think back to the Seattle Seahawks. When they had Russell Wilson playing on his fairly affordable rookie deal, they were able to get a couple of Super Bowl trips out of it. They won one of them, and they were able to take care of that defense when it came to paying guys. Now, if you're the Cowboys, clock is ticking before you have to give your quarterback huge money, and yet you don't even have one of those Super Bowl appearances to show for it yet.
No, we talked about it earlier on Get Up, and I think that's the more pressing issue. While you have this opportunity, while you have a quarterback who's on his rookie contract, who you see as a franchise guy, who you see as a solidified starter in this league, you have to win. Let's go to Jared Goff. He's been to a Super Bowl, right? Even though Carson Wentz was injured, he had his team in position to win the NFC East, and later on that team went to the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And so we've seen teams really capitalize on having quarterbacks on their rookie deals and being able to build around them. And so for Dak Prescott, for the Dallas Cowboys, Stephen Jones, Jerry Jones, this is the year, right? This is the year you have to get it done, because if you're going to give out deals to Amari Cooper, if you're going to give out deals to Dak Prescott, where the bar has been set high by the Michael Thomases, the bar has been set high by the Carson Wentz, it's going to be a lot of money going to those two players. And if you're going to try to sign Zeke as well, it makes it more money going out to where you have less opportunities to build around them. So this is the season you have to get it done. But if Zeke is threatening to stay home, is that something that brings you up and says, you know what, we're going to pay you now or make you whole in some way now that gives us an opportunity to make that run this year? Ryan
Clark, our ESPN NFL analyst, joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. You talk about that NFC East here for a second, and the Cowboys have the odds stacked against them this year only because it's been 15 years since a team repeated as NFC East champions. And of course, you have the Philadelphia Eagles sitting there, not far removed from a Super Bowl championship, but gone is Nick Foles, that ultimate security blanket for them the last couple of years. So when I sit there and put together an arbitrary list of players that have to prove themselves a little bit this year, Carson Wentz, to me, Ryan, is on that list because not so much with ability, he's got to prove he can make it through a full season.
That's all. He has to prove that he can continue to be healthy, that he can be that he can be a guy who can get you through 16 games plus the playoffs. And I think that's a very fair assessment, right? It's very fair to say, Carson, we haven't seen you be the starter of this team and produce and last through 2 full seasons of football. And so now you look at it, you have Deshaun Jackson on one side, opposite of Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, one of the premier pass-catching tight ends in the league. Everything's set up for this offense to play well.
Brought in Jordan Howard from the Bears.
And it all rests on Carson Wentz and his health. And so we all know about his ability. We all know that if he's not hurt 2 years ago, he probably wins the league MVP. But even with that, if he's not on the field, if he's not available, this team is drastically different. And there is no Nick Foles to spell him. There is no Nick Foles to get you over that hump. So it's going to be smart. It's going to be incumbent on him to be smart, watch the hits he takes, watch the chances that he takes, and be here for this team down the stretch.
Are you concerned at all about the Antonio Brown situation? Hasn't practiced much. You know, he decided to post that picture over the weekend.
He got some ugly feet.
He got some bad feet. And look, we all got some issues there maybe, but that was tough to stomach.
That is Flintstone-like. That is legit.
Perfect.
Like he's been stopping the car. Like he's been stopping the car with his feet.
You ever seen anything like that, by the way? All the years you played?
Feet that ugly?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's normal.
They're just
in the locker room.
They beat themselves up. It's terrible. They stink. This is just a bad deal. You know, the Antonio Brown thing only bothers me because of this. For all of that said about him, he's a worker, right? Everything that Antonio Brown has gotten since being a 6th-round pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers has been through hard work. He doesn't miss practices. He doesn't take off reps. He's a guy who wants to see as many opportunities to get better as any guy in the league. So the fact that foot soreness, quote unquote, is keeping him from getting reps, right? Knowing how much John Gruden, the Oakland Raiders, are depending on him, not only to play well as Antonio Brown, but to see if Derek Carr can be their quarterback of the future. I don't see him missing those things lightly. I don't see the conversation being easy for him to sit around. His game is predicated on quickness in and out of cuts, being able to accelerate, stop, and accelerate faster than other people. So if there's anything here, there's any issue, this could be a problem for the Oakland Raiders. It could be a problem for Derek Carr in that offense. And you just hope that Antonio Brown comes back soon, builds that chemistry, and you're able to see the guy we've seen the last 6 years.
And, you know, you look over at Indianapolis here for a second, and this was supposed to be the offseason, the first one, and I guess the last few, when you had Andrew Luck, who really wasn't coming off any surgeries, any extensive rehab or anything like that. It was supposed to be full systems go off of a very successful season last year. Now he's been hobbled by this calf strain, something that he first started feeling back in April,
right?
And yet it hasn't gone away yet. I mean, how much concern should we put onto that, you know, maybe this is something that bears watching here?
Well, the only thing that makes you feel better is that it's not a shoulder.
Right.
Right? You know, so that's the good thing. But not comparing it to KD at all.
I was just going to go there, and I didn't want it, but I'm glad you did.
Not comparing it to KD at all. But I remember the chatter being, man, this is a long time for a calf. I remember the chatter being, this is a lot going on for a calf. And now, my hopes is they're being extremely cautious because of his last rehab opportunity, because of the shoulder and how long it took him to get back or how long it took him to be 100% healthy. And they understand without Andrew Luck, even though it's Jacoby Brissett, we don't have a guy, right? We are not as good when he's not our quarterback. And so looking at that, you hope that they're being cautious with him. You hope that they're being careful. But it does seem strange that this is something he's felt in April, and it's still bothering him, and something that's not full contact. It's not full go, and you can't even get out there and work and participate now. What is it going to be like when the season starts? And remember, he started a little slow last season without having the reps and having to get healthy.
You know, I've been talking about this here the last couple of weeks, and I'm a huge Aaron Rodgers supporter, okay, for years. And the talent speaks for itself and what this guy's capable of doing. But I got to tell you, going into 2019, there probably has not been a season that I remember that there maybe have been this little expectations attached to the Green Bay Packers, given everything that's transpired. Last couple of seasons, now you have a head coach who's still very much unproven. You know, is it fair to not write this team off, but maybe have to adjust and recalibrate what we expect from them?
Well, you know, all expectations on Green Bay always hinged on Aaron Rodgers. It hinged on the fact that we thought he was the most talented passer we'd ever seen. We thought he was a quarterback that could create and do things in a manner that we've never really had the opportunity to watch in the league. And so I think the expectations were that. Last year was a down year, right? But he had 25 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. I think it's more not the off the field stuff, the non-actual football stuff that has us questioning the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers saying everything was Mike McCarthy, or you hearing about the risk that they have. Aaron Rodgers audibling, not just audibling at the line because the defense shows him something, but just changing the play because he didn't like it. And so you look at all of those things and you don't start to question if Aaron Rodgers has the talent. You start to question if Aaron Rodgers, the person, is the right guy to lead this team. And you do have a young coach now. But I think you have a defense that's going to be better. I think it's going to be an extremely good secondary. Devontae Adams has stepped in as the number 1 receiver, and now he's proven you understand what he can do. And, yes, you still have Aaron Rodgers, and he is still talented. And I think for the first time, probably motivated in a different way. So you look to keep his health. If he's healthy, I expect a year where Aaron Rodgers continues to be the MVP.
ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark joining us here on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Dan Graca sitting in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio and ESPN News. There's a franchise, one that you spent a lot of time with in your career here, that it's almost like write them off at your own risk, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think that some people are guilty of that or falling into that trap this year. Le'Veon Bell's gone. Antonio Brown is gone. This is a diminished version of the Steelers. Ben is a year older. I don't know. There's something about this team that I think when they head into this season, this is a club that, again, I think they're going to pick up right where they left off and just do what the Steelers always seem to do and shock everybody.
For me, I would hope so. I think a lot of times we compare players unfairly, right? Like you see an Odell and you see some of the things he does publicly on the sideline, and you think he's a locker room killer. You think he's not a good teammate. And then everything you hear from every teammate who's ever been around him, they love him, right? They love playing with him. And then you see a guy who, like Antonio Brown, for much of the time, at least until the end of last season, people thought was the perfect teammate, right? They loved his smile. But the whole time, he was imploding the locker room inside out, right? There were things that they had to deal with each and every week that didn't only stay in the locker room, they spilled on to the field. Those things are gone. This team has already had a year without Le'Veon Bell.
Right.
They've had a year of James Conner and Samuels, and they've had a year to adjust. James Washington has had a year to learn under Antonio Brown and now step in to the second wide receiver spot. This defense should be better this year. You go out and get Devin Bush, who's one of the top defensive players in the draft, who's now playing the
He's
going to
win Defensive Rookie of the Year. That's
so you have all of these things going on that say, you know what? They're still a good team. They have a Super Bowl winning coach. On the other side of that, we look at this division, where are there not questions, right? We love the Cleveland Browns on paper, right? You love what you think and expect them to be able to do offensively, but do we know?
Buyer beware.
Right? And then you have Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens and Jim Harbaugh saying, I take the over on his rushing attempts. That's not a good deal, right? You don't want a quarterback that has to run that much. And if he has to run that much, that means the passing game hasn't improved. And so this division is still could be wide open. Are you going to bet on another quarterback other than Ben Roethlisberger in this division? I don't think so. And so the Pittsburgh Steelers are square in it with the chance to represent the AFC North in the playoffs.
And I'm glad you brought that up too, right? Because there are so many questions with the two other teams. And no offense to Cincinnati, but they're not there yet. They're still a couple of years away.
Yeah, they don't even count. They're not even in the discussion. They don't factor into this discussion
not even
right now.
But the thing with the Steelers too is, it all starts up front. They still have as good an offensive line as you have in the entire sport. So that's going to cover up a lot of ills. So you stay healthy. You got a quarterback who's been there before. You mentioned the studs they brought in on defense there. And with Baltimore, we talk about these players that maybe have something to improve this year. I think Lamar Jackson is also a guy, 100%. Fairly or unfairly, deserves to be on that list because now you don't have that Flacco waiting in the wings either.
And it's no plan B anymore, right?
It's him.
This is the guy we're going with. I think he was always going to have something to prove because of style of play, right? When you're a quarterback and your legs are the most important thing about you, or your legs are the most successful way for you to win, that's difficult because you're going to get hit, right? You're going to take unnecessary pounding. You're going to put unnecessary miles on you, especially when you can't threaten with the pass accurately, right? When you're not going through progressions, when teams don't have to schematically work all week to stop what you can do from a passing standpoint, it puts more pressure on you physically. And so I think Lamar Jackson is going to have to prove that he can beat people with his arm. He can throw it a mile. right? There's velocity on every ball. We just don't know where it's going most of the time. And so he has to prove that not necessarily he can be a pocket passer, because that's always the misconception. Let's stop this athlete from athleting and make him a pocket passer. That's stupid. You shouldn't have drafted him if that's what you want to do. But they need to find ways to get him clear lanes, open opportunities where he can be accurate with the ball downfield, which backs some of these players or some of these teams off the line of scrimmage.
All right, let's close out on this one here. Is there a team out there, or give me a team that you feel is going to have a pretty good season, exceed expectations, it's kind of flying under the radar a little bit?
For me, that's always a hard question, because you feel like you study the teams and know who has flown. I mean, who's going to kind of be good.
But there's always that unpredictability in the NFL, right?
Well, so one, Philadelphia Eagles are my pick to win the NFC East. And I know there's a lot of this talk about the Cowboys and who the Cowboys could be and who they are. But I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team. I don't necessarily know that they're flying under the radar because they have the highest paid quarterback in football. But still, to me, that is a team. Doug Peterson has shown that he can coach football. Carson Wentz has shown that he can play. And this team has made improvements in places that they needed to. They have been very meticulous about putting this team together to surround Carson Wentz with what will make him great. And for me, much as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys and we're talking about the Cleveland Browns and all of these teams that have done these things to improve, I think getting Carson Wentz is an upgrade over Nick Foles, having him healthy. And I think adding Jordan Howard, Deshaun Jackson, the secondary being a year older, a year more experienced, helps this team actually, I think, contend to represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Real quick, too. Daniel Jones takes over for Eli Manning Week what?
Week, I hope never.
Never.
Honestly, I hope.
Can he fend him off, though?
I hope I don't know. I don't know if he can. I just think there's so much scrutiny around the Daniel Jones pick, and I do believe that quarterbacks can be ruined. And I'm not saying that this kid doesn't have the talent to do it, but you look at what's going on with the wide receivers in New York. You get rid of Odell Beckham, so he's gone. You have Golden Tate, who could be suspended for 4 games right now.
Yep. That's
under repeal. Corey Coleman is out. And so there's all these things happening around these players that you need, right? It's already going to be a ton of pressure on Saquon Barkley. If Daniel Jones has to quarterback this team with protection issues, with wide receiver issues, you can have a David Carr type situation, and that's not something you want.
The line is a little bit better, though. They have upgraded that to a certain degree. Like the Zeitler acquisition, Remmers, put him on the right side. We know that that's a guy who started in the Super Bowl, had a rough day against Von Miller, we know.
But that's still, Von Miller, though.
That's Von Miller. You're not going to face Von Miller every week. Right. The thing with the Giants, too, you worry about Saquon, given the nature of the position, too, and what they're asking of him. You just don't want to see that guy get run into the ground, right?
They're going to ask a ton of him, and I think, to whom much is given. Obviously, this guy has an immense amount of talent, and he seems to want to carry the team. But right now, I think the Giants have to be smart in the ways that they use him and making sure you're getting him opportunities in space and not everything has to be earned the way we saw it last year.
ESPN NFL analyst Ryan Clark, thanks for joining me as always, my friend.
Thank you, my man. Have a good one, brother.
Good seeing you. Do you have frequent heartburn, like the kind where you have antacid stashed everywhere in case it pops up? You know what I mean. You keep some in your bag or your desk or your car or your nightstand. You have those chalky tablets ready for whenever and wherever heartburn strikes. Well, listen up. There's an easier way to deal with your heartburn. Prilosec OTC. Just 1 pill a day will last a full 24 hours with zero heartburn. Kick your antacid habit. It's possible with Prilosec OTC. Use as directed for 14 days to treat frequent heartburn, not for immediate relief. Dan Grosso.